Welcome to HR Voices, a podcast for independent HR and people professionals and the businesses they support. HR Voices is brought to you by the expert team at HR Independence Limited. We hope you enjoy. Hi everyone, and welcome to the next edition of the HR Voices podcast. I am, as usual, joined by my co-host Mary Asante today. Hi Mary.
Hi Charlotte. Hi everyone.
And today we are joined by Colin Hall. Hello, Colin.
Hi there. Nice to see you, Charlotte.
Thank you very much for joining us. And Colin is a business planning expert. I'm going to get him to tell you a little bit about who he is and what he does and where he comes from in a moment. But in terms of just setting the scene for today's episode, we're talking today really about planning and budgeting and looking ahead and thinking about what you need to do for your business moving forward. And actually, I think it's quite relevant to any small business, not just consultants and members of HRI. So we're hoping that Colin is going to share some really good tips and insight for us on how to start thinking about budgeting and planning for our business and looking ahead to 2025. So Colin, tell us a little bit about you.
So I run a boutique consultancy called Biz Plans UK that specializes in strategic planning and business planning. And a huge amount of that actually involves problem solving for companies who aren't quite sure what the problems are they face and therefore don't know what plan to come up with. So we help them with fixing those problems with their processes so that the plans they come up with can actually be executed. My background is very much corporate world. So I started off in British Airways. I was there for 11 years. I've run multiple boutique consultancies. I've run media companies. I've run companies here in the UK and China. I've been director of nearly 25 companies and MD or general manager for 8.
Wow.
Excellent. That's a lot of companies.
It's a lot of expertise.
Great. When it comes to business planning, I think it's safe to say that if you fail to plan, then you plan to fail.
Yes, that's one of my favorite quotes. And the good news is that if you are worried about the competency of your planning as a business, you're in good company because everybody, without exception, does it badly. So if you are worried, thinking, oh, I don't know how to do it, or I've messed it up, or this is rubbish, or whatever, you haven't necessarily gone wrong, or at least no further wrong than anybody else. One of the things that everybody has in common, including me, is that we're all wrong. We're all wrong about something, and that wrongness manifests itself in the plans that we create. And one of the things that I try to do with companies is get them to think about business planning as a process that doesn't actually end. If you try and create a finite product, an end product like a business plan, then there's a feeling that it's either a good plan or a bad plan. And therefore, you've either done a good job or a bad job. And that's the wrong way to look at it. It's an iterative process. The world around you changes constantly. Conditions within your business change constantly, and your plan needs to reflect it. And business planning is as much about strategic mindset as it is about creating a document.
What is business planning? Because again, we are all really good at throwing buzzwords around and assuming that everyone knows what we mean, but sometimes the same words or terminology can mean very different things to different people. So what's business planning?
So if you go look it up online, you'll find lots of very good academic definitions. Any one of them can apply. Personally, I regard business planning as a strategic process to align your objectives with the reality you face and help you overcome the problems in your business.
Great. So in that context, then thank you very much for clarifying that. So in that context, if somebody is thinking about a business plan, it's good that you put it right up front that it's a process and it's not a finite or definitive document that you go, oh, this is it, finished, and put it there and then move on with your life. It's a process and it's a breathing document that you live with and so implement, review, etc. as you go along. What sort of things can someone expect to see in their business plan?
Well, I think lots and lots of people who embark upon business planning processes never actually end up with a business plan. And that's because the value in creating a business plan is the planning, not the plan. So another quote that I like is from General Eisenhower from World War II. I hate plans, but I love planning. It's what you learn on the journey that's of value. And hopefully you end up with a coherent plan that you can present to people and get them on board. But the value is really in the understanding of your business, your landscape, your competitors, your customers, your suppliers. That's where the value really is. And far too many people get caught up on the document. What does a document look like? What chapters does it have to have? What headings? What data? How big should it be? How many years financial projections do I need? All that kind of stuff. And unless you're using a business plan to raise finance, where you are writing for an audience, not for yourself, and in such circumstances, that business plan is actually not a planning tool, it's a marketing document. If you need to apply for a grant and you need a business plan, you write a business plan that fits the criteria of that grant. Same with a loan or you're after investment. It's got to be realistic. It's got to be something that's achievable. It's got to be something that you stand a chance of more or less achieving. Otherwise, you might get in trouble with the investor or the loan provider, etc. But it's a marketing document. And far too people make the classic mistake of starting with a template. Now, there is nothing wrong with templates. There are lots of good ones, but they go straight to a template and then they start to fill it out. And they completely bypass any thought, analysis, planning processes. They go straight to just brain dump into the template. Here's a plan. And then, surprise, they ignore it because reality isn't what they've written down.
Okay, so what should that process be?
Okay, so there are multiple approaches, and you either do it from the outside in or the inside out, is my approach. So an outside in approach will be to say, at the very biggest level, what stuff is going on in the world that's going to affect me, my customers, my marketplace, the technology I use, whatever things that influence my business, and try and map out what they are. Because any plan that you create, any course of action will be affected by all those things around you. And if you just ignore them and then you go merrily off down a path and suddenly you get tripped up by new legislation or a change of government or a new budget, it suddenly makes what you want to do non-optimum or even impossible, then you wasted all the efforts. You start from the outside in and you finish up with yourself and you look at, okay, given everything around me, how can I maximize my business? The other way to do is from the inside out and say, okay, this is what I am. This is what I have in terms of assets, capabilities, products, and services. Now let's look at see what's going on around me and how I can take advantage or apply those things in a way that makes me the most money or achieves my goals. So outside in or inside out are the best ways to think about it. A tool in that process about a document comes right at the end. So you're just doing lots and lots of thinking. And maybe once you've got a bit of data, you start doing some modeling about, okay, what if questions? And there's all these what if questions for HR professionals. What if the government decides to bring forward employment rights from day one of your employment, as they have done? So it's these what if questions and their impact on your business that are the most important to answer. And once you've got good answers to those questions, the plans and what you're going to do about them almost fall out of the process.
Very interesting, isn't it? I mean, it's almost taking a persona and a SWOT analysis view and looking at your macro environment and then coming in and looking at your internal environment. I mean, talking to clients in the last couple of weeks, the budget changes have been key. And for some businesses and particularly charities, they're hard hitting and they're having to change their plan. Definitely. And they're having to adapt their plan and think about how they deliver their services and how they keep everybody and how they keep moving forward as an organisation. So the risks are real, aren't they?
Very, very much. And a lot of people don't go with the outside in approach first because they're not confident of their understanding of politics or economics or international trade or all those kind of big issues. But that's fine. You don't have to be. There are lots of people out there, clever people, who can sum up these things quite simply to help us understand what's going on. And you can just get a good understanding of what's going on around you and then think, actually, that means this, my business or my customers or my marketplace. And once you've got a really good understanding of your landscape, then you can start focusing on yourself, because you're in the back of your mind what's going on around you.
I think if you get to that point, so in terms of looking at the landscape, what's happening around you, yes, you've touched on a couple of political potentially influences on what is going on in the macro economy in the world, etc. And what else around you do you need to consider? I'm sure you need to consider things such as what's happening around you in terms of your competition, your actual market space, and other stuff.
Absolutely. So the best tool I find for the underlying landscape is a PESTLE analysis, which is an acronym, which is political, economic, social, technical, legal, and environmental. So things like that you need to be aware of as well. And that's the things that affect everybody. Then you start to look at what your competitors are doing. And then you're looking at a circle around you, and you're looking at your customers, what's happening to them, your supply chain, what's happening to them, and then your competitors around you and what they're doing. And then finally, you look at yourself. So those are the different areas to look at. So SWOT analysis, I think you mentioned, SWOT analysis is a hugely underrated tool. One of the most important things with any business planning process. You have to be honest with yourself. You have to admit where you have weaknesses, where you have gaps in your capabilities, where perhaps you have issues that need to be addressed. I've come across so many companies that they've got great businesses, they've got great products, but they have a problem somewhere, and they won't admit what the problem is. Very often because of problems to do with personnel, or the head salesman keeps putting off clients, but because he's got shares, you can't do anything about it. And so there's also all these sorts of issues, which obviously from a HR perspective become very important. They just won't admit what their issues are. Some people have got out-of-date technology and just won't admit or just won't invest to replace it. Other people are so in love with their baby, with their idea, that despite all evidence to the contrary, they plow ahead even when it's not working. So humility and honesty to admit when things aren't quite right is so important. You save yourself so much pain and cost later.
Interesting, because I've had a number of conversations over the years around founders and owners getting out of their own way to some degree, because they are so hooked on their idea and their passion. And obviously it's great to have that passion, but you have to translate it into something that's deliverable and that's going to work for you and deliver you income.
Absolutely. You need belief. If you haven't got belief in yourself, in your team, in your product, in your company, you're going to struggle to succeed. But there's a very small step from self-belief to blind faith. And blind faith is belief in the absence of or contrary to the evidence, which is not helpful for anybody.
I think that's a really good point and a really good distinction to make. Like believing in yourself, your products, your team, what you're delivering, etc. Because actually, if you don't believe in something that you are either putting in front of somebody, either through sales, proposal, or anything like that, and so it's about time you probably do a bit of soul searching to see whether you can make tweaks here and there, or whether it's time to totally change your plan or your planning process and go down a different route based on what the evidence suggests, or whether it's quite unfortunately, regardless of what we do in this instance, we're not going anywhere. So we probably need to say goodbye at this point.
And on that point, if you can't get an external voice, then find one. There are mentorship programs you can join. There are business coaches, there are consultants, you can get non-exec directors. Do something, but get somebody else that you can throw ideas against, somebody who's willing to challenge you in a good way and make you justify difficult decisions. And it will be that that process of making you justify it makes you think harder, and actually you find a way through, and that you are right, you just needed to change it a little bit. Or it may well be that actually you admit to yourself that actually I was on the wrong path completely. It's time to throw it out and start again.
And it's pretty much, there's also this thing around when you are actually on a path, you don't necessarily see what's behind you, so whether it's a straight path, a curvy path, or a wavy path. So having that soundboard, someone who is looking at your path that you are creating, going, actually, it is quite too wavy here, or you probably need to stop and straighten things out a bit and stuff like that, it's definitely beneficial in terms of having either a business mentor, a buddy, or a coach, or a sounding board.
Yeah, and another piece of advice I would give people is don't let perfection get in the way of progress. Far too many people either get analysis paralysis. There's too much information for them to actually be able to absorb it, analyze it, and come up with a concise picture of the world, and therefore figure out what to do to address the world. Or they wait for one more piece of information, one more piece of data, so that they can make their decision making perfect. It won't be. By the time you've got all the data, it's too late. And if you go in on time, you haven't got enough data. That's okay, because it's a process. You can always self-correct. As long as you haven't bet the house on a particular course of action and can't undo it, you're fine. You're going to make mistakes, and it's okay. Just don't bet the house. And if you need to gather data, then just follow the fail fast principle, which is to do small experiments, try something out, see if it works, see how the market reacts, see your staff react, work with suppliers, do A/B testing, whether it be in marketing, whether it be in contracts, whatever it may be, figure out what works and then follow the evidence.
Interesting, isn't it? Because I think I am a little bit of a perfectionist, and so I can recognize and resonate with some of what you're saying, and sometimes put myself in freeze mode because I don't want to take the next step or make the decision because I want something else to be agreed or I want to find something else out. So I resonate with that. But it's really interesting, and I'm interested, I guess, in whether actually what happens is if you can have a plan in your head, but actually if you then go through the outside in and the inside out, actually then whether you end up with a very different plan. Is that something you come across because you've actually explored more avenues and more ways of doing things?
If you believe something very strongly, let's not get into areas of religion, just belief about how markets work, how your customers work, how products work, etc. And it's something that you believe strongly. As you start to find evidence that that belief is incorrect, some people will shy away from looking deeper because their mental models are fragile. And this, when it comes down to having the mental strength to actually say, no, I'm strong enough to be able to survive having those mental models shattered and learning something new, and that's going to help me in my business. Because it also might go the way, you might reinforce you. You might find that actually that you're a genius and you've got everything right.
But I think it's good to be held to account by others and also to be challenged by others, because I think we can get very hoodwinked into our own way of thinking.
And otherwise perfectly serviceable plans fail to get executed because they're not where they think they are, and they ignore the challenges they have to face along the way. Which is why I prefer the outside-in approach, because you've described that landscape, the swamps and the mountains and the forest you've got to cross before you start working on what the actual plan is.
Yeah. So in terms of that outside-in approach, for somebody who is new to, they may not necessarily be new to planning, but they may be new to that mindset in terms of looking at things from the outside in. What are some of the challenges or the barriers that they may come across adapting or trying to adapt that mindset?
The single biggest challenge is when you start to look at it properly, you realize there's so much you don't know. So, and if you're not someone who follows politics, economics, and trade, and all those other things that go into, say, a pest analysis, if you don't regularly follow them to an extent, once you start looking at it, you realize there's so much and it becomes too daunting. And I would say, don't let that put you off. There's no reason why you have to know everything today. If your business is running without a plan, it's all right. 90% of small businesses don't have a business plan. So the fact that you don't have one doesn't mean you're about to fail. You'll be better if you have a good one, but you're not about to fail. Take the time to acquire the knowledge. Personally, I listen to podcasts and watch short YouTube videos. I find it a better way of gathering information than reading dense tomes and so on. And I've got a series of voices that I trust to be relatively impartial. They're not always right. I always make sure I get mixed voices. Just spend a little time each day adding to your education what's going on in the world. And then it would be like osmosis. Suddenly, one day, you suddenly start seeing connections. And you realize that, oh, well, that means that, and that means my customer's going to do this. Oh, if I do this instead, I can make some money. And those things will come naturally. And as I said, it's an ongoing process.
Is that you can make some money or you can help your customers.
We need to do both. We need to do both.
Absolutely.
Sorry, I was just going to ask on the point you talking about self-development. I mean, that itself is a challenge, isn't it? Because when you're doing the delivery and you're trying to serve your clients and you're trying to keep your team moving and all those sorts of things, that's one of the things that perhaps goes out the window a little bit, isn't it?
It's about having, like I said, I do all mine when I'm walking the dog, driving the car, having my breakfast. So I'm not dealing directly with clients at any point when I'm doing those things. And that's how I absorb the information. And again, going back to the point of perfection is the enemy of progress. I just talk at camera for 2 or 3 minutes, and sometimes they come across quite smoothly, and sometimes I trip over my tongue half the time, but I still publish them because it's just about moving forward. And tomorrow there'll be another one, and the fact that the previous one I sounded like an idiot doesn't matter.
I mean, that's a really important point in terms of being a successful business owner or entrepreneur or business leader. The fact that not everything will be on point or perfect all the time. And the fact that sometimes you can make mistakes, and other times, like you said, you put a bit of research into it before you record these videos and put them out there. So what would go wrong might not necessarily be the content of the video. It may just be tripping over a stump because you typically do yours whilst you're on the move. Or
and I have fallen over tree trunks, yes.
And stuff like that. But what I admire about what you just said is the fact that I still put it out there anyway. So it doesn't get in the way of your schedule, so to speak, in terms of, okay, I put these videos out there either every day or every other day or whatever, and you are going to do it regardless of whether you get what can be perceived as a perfect recording or a not so perfect ones. And I think that can be applicable in so many places. One of the things that I learned working with technology companies, and sometimes I wish I apply more of it in my own businesses and other things that I do, is the ability and actually to put a beta or something out there, which comes with the recognition that this is not a perfect product and we'll be improving it, we'll be releasing patches here and there. So it goes to the customer with a recognition that, okay, this is not rubbish, but it will do most of what you want and deliver most of the functionality. But we'll do patches, we'll do whatever later, fixes later to get it to exactly where it needs to be.
Yeah, I mean, the whole minimum viable product concept is brilliant. I've always followed it. Far too many kind of companies that have gone bust because they kept adding more features, making products and services better and better before they launched, and they just burnt through their cash, and suddenly they're bankrupt and they've not had any revenue, got no customers signed up, whereas they could have gone to market 18 months ago and got some customers in, and they would then also have had real world feedback on how to improve what they already have done to make it stronger, to retain those customers, get the loyalty. And there's lots of approaches. You can have learner customers where you pick someone and say, look, I'm not going to charge you, this is free. Just give me feedback. I'll give you the alpha or the beta version of the service or the product, whatever it is. As long as you're honest with me about the issues you face, it'll always be free, or it'll be free for a year or whatever, and have learner customers. So there's lots of things you can do in that to test things out and crack on. Lots of companies are their own worst enemies when it comes to just holding back.
Yeah, well, it's opportunity lost, isn't it? It's potentially revenue lost as well. Okay, so if we were going to start thinking about our business plan for 2025, where would you suggest we start? What would be your sort of first steps?
3 questions. First of all, why are you doing what you're doing? And I don't mean why are you in HR, why are you in technology, why are you in sales, whatever, but why are you running a business doing those things? Because if your plan doesn't address your why, you're not going to deliver it. So if you're doing it because you want to be incredibly rich, then you better have a plan that gets you there, otherwise you're not going to deliver it. If you're doing it because you love helping people, then don't do a plan that isn't about helping people. So why are you doing what you're doing? Because that will then inform everything. And if, as most of us are small business owners, the second question to answer is what? What do you like doing? As in a day-to-day, what gets you going in the day? Is it working with clients? Are you someone who loves spreadsheets? Are you someone who hates spreadsheets? Do you love people? Do you hate people? Do you love selling? Do you hate selling? If you develop a plan that requires you to do lots of things you hate and not things you love in terms of the day-to-day, again, you'll fail to deliver it. So you need to be aware of that when you construct the actual plan, as in the actions you're going to do. And the third thing is, what is your attitude to risk? 60%, if not more, ventures fail inside 2 years. And by ventures, I don't just mean companies. It could be a new product. It could be buying another company. It could be expansion into new territory, whatever. So well over half of ventures fail. And that means whatever you've applied to it, you risk losing. So what is your attitude to risk? The more risk you're willing to bear, then the quicker you can achieve what you want, but also the more you stand to lose. Once you've answered those three questions correctly, you're then in a position to actually start creating a plan.
Okay. So risk is an interesting one, isn't it? Because you have to think, I mean, do you then have to start doing some of that wider macro environment planning to get to the point of what your appetite for risk is?
No, because that's talking about the risk of the thing you're going to do. So how likely is it to come off? Which of course you have to do. You don't want to do something that's only got a 1% chance of doing it. This is about your attitude to risk. If you are a huge risk taker, you'll happily do the 1% thing because the potential gains are probably very high. But if you want zero risk, well, you're going to be hard pressed because you've got to spend at least some money. You've got to go to events or have some brochures made or have a website, whatever. It's going to be some money spent. So between almost no risk and uber risk, your comfort point is somewhere in between, and it's personal to you. And if there's you've got partners, then it's a collective risk. How are you together comfortable about what your risk is?
Yeah, I mean, I think for many small businesses, definitely it's a considered risk around partner, family, and income you need to bring in as well, because a lot of people take a risk stepping out of a full-time permanent role to go into entrepreneurship or a small business. And that's a wider risk around income and how you're going to make just some basic money.
Yeah, and the fact you've done that suggests that you have at least some appetite for risk, or at least some ability to withstand risk. Otherwise, you might not have done that.
Yeah, and I mean, another question I have, and maybe this is a different conversation for a different day, but in terms of the risk, we talked about, I mean, Mary touched on it earlier on around how far do you keep going until you make a decision that this is not happening or is not working?
Well, it depends what it is. It's very good to have some form of milestone or go, no go decision making. So, because we're talking about so many different things it could be about, is it talking about, if you look about the HR space, maybe you're going to launch a whole series of training videos as a new product offering, as an example. And you need to find a distribution channel, you've got to make them, the quality's got to be good enough, you've got to write the material, deliver it, market it. There's a whole bunch of things that you have to do if that's what you want to do. Most of those costs are up front, because until you've built it, you can't sell it. Otherwise, you're selling vaporware, and if you start doing that too much, then you lose a lot of trust. So you have to do a lot of upfront costs. And once that cost is incurred, then it's marketing cost. But if you're marketing and selling and nobody's buying, the temptation is, well, I've spent all this money. I need to get people to start using it. So I'll spend more money selling and more money marketing, and they're still not doing it. And I've known a couple of companies who've been in similar situations, and they almost make themselves bankrupt. So they're desperate to make it a success. They just throw more and more money at it. And it's not because they've made a bad product. It just wasn't wanted, or the price was too wrong, or there was something about it that wasn't quite right, or there was somebody out there who was doing the same thing for a tenth of the price, because they didn't do their research properly in terms of the competitive offering. There'll be something about it which is flawed. It's not because they actually did a bad job or don't know what they're talking about. But you have to be able to say, okay, this is not working. I'm not going to spend any more money. My appetite to risk has been reached. I have to accept that this is a failure, park it to one side, take the learning, and then off you go. And in that example I just gave you, there's a very good chance that the product proposition would be wrong. And the product proposition is where you take the physical thing or service that you're offering and the need that's it's addressing with the client and the price point at which they're willing to pay for that need. So I'll give you the simple example I give people is if you're in the business of helping people bring their shopping home, then the simplest solution is a carrier bag, and they cost 5p from Sainsbury's. Now, you could sell them a Gucci bag. Utility-wise, it's just the same thing. It is a bag you can put things in. But they cost many hundreds of pounds, and guess how many people are going to buy a Gucci bag to bring their shopping home? None, because there's a mismatch in that product proposition between the utility, the price, and the need. And lots of people don't give enough thought to that, and they over-engineer, they put too much cost into their product or their service, and they'll never get a return on the price the client is willing to pay. You can move that price a bit with a good value proposition, which is a completely different skill set, which is about how you convince someone that what you're offering is the right offering for them at the right price. And you can move people's perception for a price point, but not so much that they'll go from a carrier bag to a Gucci bag.
I think that is also it's an important point, because again, lots of businesses can come up with ideas, with products, etc., where in itself the product may not be something that people may not want. They may like the product, but it's a matter of whether it's designed for the right purpose in the eyes of your target market, and whether it's also pitched at the right price. Let's take it with the example between the carrier bag and the Gucci bag, for example. You may, if it's to do with shopping and bringing your weekly grocery home, then yes, everyone wants either a carrier bag or a tote bag or something like that. No one, or very few people. There might be, we can't say no one, because there might be some people who would want to go grocery shopping in their Gucci bag, but there will be far and few in between. So being able to pitch your product at the right price to appeal to your market audience is also very important.
Yeah, I mean, the whole topic of pricing, product propositions, value propositions, I mean, those things deserve their own podcasts. I mean, they're very in-depth. But again, they do form part of your business plan when you're actually looking at some of the detail. So what exactly is your value proposition? Because if you can't articulate it, then your sales aren't going to be as good.
It's something actually probably a lot of our members do struggle with a little bit around what their value proposition is, particularly in the consultancy world, because your value proposition potentially is the time that you can give people. And that can sometimes be, I mean, yes, you can quantify it in hours and a cost per hour, but actually then when you get into sort of bundles of services, it becomes a little bit harder to do, because you want to perhaps provide, I don't know, a suite of policies or a contract review, but then there might be some ad hoc support that goes alongside it and things like that. So value proposition, I think, is quite challenging for the sector and our members.
Right, value proposition is more fundamental. I mean, that's really important stuff, but that's more product proposition stuff. So the value proposition stuff is separate from the product proposition, and it talks about what problems are you solving? So what need or pain point are you addressing for the client? What are the benefits of what you do? How are you doing it, which is important to the clients? And why you? Other people talk about USP. I hate USP because nothing's really unique in the world. I just think why you? It's much simpler and straightforward. And then those four things together form a value proposition. And there are about half a dozen little models you can use to pull these things together. And it actually, there's a lot of science behind it. And then you can also get into brand-led value propositions as well, which work for some companies. And you can actually steal other people's value propositions in a non-steal way, as in you're not stealing their IP. But if they do something and you do it in the same way they do it, but different industries, if their value proposition is really well known, you can be, oh yeah, we're like Uber for dog sitting. And if people know what Uber is, they suddenly, you've basically stolen the value proposition for dog sitting. So you can do those kind of things as well. But there's a huge science behind it.
Yes,
Exciting.
and it's again, it's one of those things that when we think specifically about our community in terms of the consultancy space where people are delivering their service and can sometimes be a very crowded market, how can you use business planning as a tool to help you to stand out, to answer the why you, the why me type question in that process?
Sure. So business, one of the elements of business planning, because if you start breaking business planning down to individual activities that you might do, and then there's dozens of different models. We talked about a couple of them, PESTLE and SWOT, and there's Ansos Matrix, and there's Portified Forces, and there's loads of them. But one of the best ones to do what you're talking about is how do you stand out in a crowded marketplace is market segmentation. So you define a market and you can get it narrower, narrower, that is your marketplace. So you could say very generically, I'm a HR professional and I can do all the things that HR professional can do for all companies. And you could do that, but it's very hard to then market that to people because it's very broad. You've got to spend a fortune on marketing and you can't do it. So you might say, okay, well, I'm going to be a HR professional for charities because I understand charity sectors, or for technology or construction, and you go by market. And then you would say, actually, I'm not going to do all the things a HR person does. I'm going to specialize in dispute resolution. So if you're having disputes with staff, I will make sure your contracts are correct. I'll make sure the disciplinary process is correct. I'll make sure that you're following the correct procedures and not creating a liability for a claim afterwards. That's my specialization. So I'm going to be in the construction industry. So there's my vertical, and it's going to be that specific element of HR. There's my horizontal, and that sweet spot, I'm an expert, and I'm the one you should go to. So that's a simple example of having the correct segmentation. And you've just got to figure out, based on your experience, your current client base, and where you see the future demand coming. This is where you need to understand your landscape, which industries are going to go up, which are going to go down. So think about things like hospitality. Hospitality is going to go down because of, I think, we're going to have some problems in the economy. Whereas things like construction, big construction, is going to go up because of investment from the government, and things like renewable energy is going to go up. So just think about what's going on in the wider environment, and even if you don't serve it today, you may decide that's where you're going to serve tomorrow.
Good sound advice. So in terms of getting sort of, well, I think my key, I'm sorry, I'm waffling because I'm reflecting actually as we're talking. I mean, the key takeaway is actually we've got to stop winging it, and we've actually got to get on with understanding the market in which we're operating in. We've got to do some research. We've got to understand what we're trying to achieve. We need to understand our purpose, our goals, our objectives, and where we want to get to. And then we've got to do the research and get in there and make sure that the plan works, and then get the plan done, which is great. But that sounds like a lot, doesn't it?
It does. And that's why so many people don't do it, because
Yeah.
like I said, 90% don't have a business plan because it's too intimidating.
Yeah.
So the key is not to try and do it too quickly or all at once. Start with awareness. Just being aware of what's going on around you, being aware of your own business. How much time do you spend actually in your business looking around and going, actually, this person over there, they're really hardworking. I don't make good enough use of this person. Or, well, why did I buy that thing over there? I'm not using it. The simple things about your own business and the things around you. Once you have an awareness of what's going on, then you could decide where you're going to put your efforts in terms of specific research, because you can't research everything.
No.
So it starts with
No.
awareness, and that awareness gives you information, and then you can start to make better decisions. And at the end of the day, business planning is all about just making better decisions.
It is. And so if you were going to start, if some of our listeners wanted to sort of get into business planning, what would be the first step? How could they perhaps get in touch with you, and how can they start that process? What sort of things would you be looking for them to do to start moving things along?
Well, everybody's different. As I said, those three questions are very important: the why, the what, and the attitude to risk. So I always start there with a new client. We'll go somewhere, coffee house, whatever, and just have a conversation about those three things. I'm not a business coach. I'm a strategic consultant, but they're very three coach-like questions, because if you don't get those right, you end up going down a rabbit hole and you're wasting everyone's time, because you end up with a very good plan, but it's not a good plan for that person.
Brilliant, thank you. That's really useful. So thank you, Colin. We are so blessed with so many great speakers that come on and share their expertise and their time, and we really do appreciate that. So thank you very much indeed. And thank you for joining us on the HR Voices podcast. If you would like to get in touch with us, if you would like to come on and be a guest like Colin has done, then you are very welcome to make contact with us at hrvoices@hrindependencecouk, and you will find all of our episodes on the usual channels. Thank you very much, everybody, and we will see you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of HR Voices. If you have a topic you'd like us to cover or would like to be a guest, we'd love to hear from you. Connect with us on social media or email us at hrvoices@hrindependencecouk. Tune in next time.